Who actually governs, and to whom must they answer?
Because answering that dictates the entire structure of the Indian state.
Mm.
We're looking at the parliamentary system, which is also referred to conceptually as the Westminster model, or cabinet government, or sometimes responsible government.
Responsible government. Okay, that feels like a key word.
It's the absolute key word. The defining characteristic of a parliamentary system is that the executive, so the people actually running the country, the Council of Ministers, is entirely responsible to the legislature for all of its policies.
Meaning they only get to stay in office as long as they keep the confidence of that legislature?
Precisely. If the legislature loses faith in them, they're out.
Wow. So, to figure out how the executive is responsible to the legislature, we first need to define who the executive actually is. And here is where it gets really interesting for exams, because the constitutional setup points to a dual executive.
Right, so let's ground this in the foundational articles you absolutely must know. At the center, this relationship between the executive and the legislature is governed primarily by Articles 74 and 75.
Okay, 74 and 75.
Yeah, and in the states, you have the exact mirrored relationship governed by Articles 163 and 164.
So 74 and 75 for the center, 163 and 164 for the states. Got it. But let's talk about this split personality of the executive. We have the nominal executive and the real executive.
Right. So the president is the nominal executive. The terminology you might actually see on a test is de jure, or titular head.
De jure.
Yeah. The president is the head of state. They reign, but they do not rule.
Meaning they don't make the day-to-day decisions.
Correct. They act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. And this isn't just like a polite suggestion. The 42nd and 44th constitutional amendments legally cemented the fact that the president is bound by this advice.
Bound by it. Okay.
Yeah.
And on the other side, we have the prime minister, who is the real executive.
Yeah.
The de facto head.
Yeah.
The head of government.
Exactly. The prime minister is the one wielding the actual executive power in the name of the president.
Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm conceptualizing this right. It's almost like a major sports franchise.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the president is the ceremonial owner of the team. They hold the title. They shake hands in the VIP box. The stadium might even have their name on the plaques somewhere, but they aren't down on the grass. The prime minister is the head coach on the field. They're calling the plays, deciding who is in the starting lineup, and actively managing the blood, sweat, and tears of the game.
That actually perfectly captures the dynamic. The owner has the ultimate theoretical authority, but those 42nd and 44th amendments essentially say the owner must use the head coach's playbook.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, Article 74 specifically mandates that there shall be a council of ministers headed by the PM to aid and advise the president. It's the legal trigger that transfers real power to the PM.
Okay, so now that we know the PM is the head coach, how does this team actually get on the field and play the game? Like, instead of just reciting a list of features, let's trace the actual life cycle of a government. How do they get the power in the first place?
Well, it starts with majority party rule. The political party that secures a majority of seats in the Lok Sabha gets to form the government.
Okay.
Then the president invites the leader of that majority party to become the prime minister.
Wait, what if no single party has a clear majority?
In that case, a coalition of parties can band together to prove they have the numbers. But once the PM is appointed, they advise the president on who else should be appointed as ministers.
Which establishes this incredible concentration of power at the top. I mean, the prime minister is suddenly wearing 3 massive hats simultaneously. They're leading the Council of Ministers, they're the leader of the parliament, and they are the leader of the ruling party.
They're pulling all the strings.
Yeah.
And that massive influence is exactly why the system has built-in mechanisms for how the cabinet operates internally. For one, there's political homogeneity. Because they have to run the country together, ministers usually belong to the same political party and share a common ideology.
Or in a coalition, they agree on a common minimum program.
Right? Exactly.
But how do they make sure those unelected bureaucrats or outside experts don't just swoop in and take over the cabinet?
Through the principle of double membership. To be a minister in the executive, you must also be a member of the legislature. You cannot govern without facing the voters.
You have to be an MP.
Yes. If someone who isn't a member of parliament is appointed as a minister, the clock immediately starts ticking. They have a strict 6-month window to get elected to parliament, either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, otherwise they lose their job.
So the executive is physically born out of the legislature. They literally sit in the same room.
Yeah.
But they also have their own private meetings, right?
They do, and those are protected by strict oaths of secrecy. Ministers are legally bound to keep cabinet proceedings and decisions completely secret.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, it allows them to argue fiercely behind closed doors, debate policies, and disagree internally before they emerge unified into the public eye.
Which brings us to how they maintain their power, or I guess lose it. The shield wall. Collective responsibility.
This is it. The bedrock principle of the entire parliamentary system, enshrined in Article 75. The Council of Ministers is collectively answerable specifically to the Lok Sabha. The famous phrase is that they sink and swim together.
Okay, I have to pause here and play devil's advocate on this one. I understand the theory, but is it practically fair? I mean, an entire government can sink based on a single policy vote.
Right.
To use a very relatable exam prep analogy, that sounds exactly like a high-stakes college group project.
You know the ones.
If one person completely messes up their slide of the presentation, the professor doesn't just fail that one student. The entire group gets a failing grade. Doesn't that create a highly volatile situation?
It definitely feels harsh, but the underlying logic is actually brilliant. It forces absolute cabinet unity. If ministers could just shrug and say, well, the finance minister messed up, but my department is doing fine, the government would fracture instantly.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, by making them sink or swim together, it guarantees that once a decision is made in the cabinet, every single minister must defend it publicly, regardless of their personal reservations.
So they either hold the line together or they all fall. And if they fall, the whole thing can be reset.
That's the dissolution of the lower house. The president can dissolve the Lok Sabha on the advice of the prime minister before its 5-year term is up, triggering fresh elections.
Wow.
The executive can essentially hit the reset button on the legislature if they feel they need a new mandate.
So what does this all mean for us? We have a system where the executive is sitting inside the legislature, holding on to power by the skin of their teeth, reliant on a constant majority, and forced to defend every action as a unified group project. If it's as precarious as it sounds, why on earth did India's constitution makers choose it?
To answer that, we really have to look at the framers' philosophical choice about the nature of democracy. When you look at the constitutional debates, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar made a fascinating argument. He said, the draft constitution has preferred more responsibility to more stability.
More responsibility to more stability. If you take only one concept into your exam hall, it should be that exact quote.
Absolutely. Ambedkar argued that an ideal democratic executive must be both stable and responsible. But human nature and political reality dictate that you can rarely maximize both simultaneously.
Right.
The presidential system, like in the United States, prioritizes stability. The president has a fixed 4-year term and doesn't rely on the legislature's daily approval, but the parliamentary system prioritizes responsibility.
The daily accountability. In a democracy, the government must answer to the people every single day, not just once every 5 years at the ballot box.
And they face this daily accountability through their representatives in parliament. Every single day the parliament is in session, the executive is interrogated.
Let's define the actual mechanics of that interrogation, because these are prime exam keywords.
Sure. First, you have question hour, the first hour of a sitting where MPs ask questions and ministers must answer them on the floor. Then you have adjournment motions, which literally pause the entire parliament to force a debate on an urgent matter of public importance. And of course, the ultimate weapon, the no confidence motion. If passed, the government falls immediately. They are under constant surveillance.
Let me bring it back to the student experience for a second. The parliamentary system is essentially like an educational setup where the teacher gives you continuous pop quizzes, daily homework checks, and random interrogations. It is high stress, daily responsibility.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. While a presidential system is more like having your entire grade rest on one massive final exam every 4 years, you have the stability of knowing nobody's going to fail you on a random Tuesday, but you aren't really being held accountable for your daily progress either.
That pop quiz versus final exam framing perfectly isolates Ambedkar's choice. But, the merits extend beyond just daily responsibility. Because the executive is drawn directly from the legislature, it creates harmony between the organs.
Meaning less gridlock.
Exactly. You don't have the constant grinding gridlock you often see in a system with strict separation of powers, where the executive and legislature are essentially at war with each other over budgets or laws.
Right, because the PM commands a majority in the legislature by definition. If they can't get their laws passed, they aren't the PM anymore.
It also prevents despotism. Authority doesn't rest with a single dictator. It's dispersed across a council, a cabinet. Furthermore, it provides a ready alternative government.
Oh, like if they lose a vote.
Yeah, if the ruling party loses a vote of confidence, there isn't a constitutional collapse. The head of state simply invites the leader of the opposition to see if they can form a government.
And I imagine it suits a plural society well, too. A prime minister can select ministers from various regions, linguistic groups, and social sections, giving a highly diverse nationwide representation in the halls of power.
It does. But there is a massive trade-off here. If you prioritize daily accountability, you deliberately sacrifice long-term stability.
So let's flip the coin. What are the negative side effects?
No.
Because a system this volatile has to have demerits.
Oh, absolutely. The primary drawback is unstable government. There is absolutely no guarantee that a government will survive its full 5-year term. Coalitions can fracture, members can defect, and a sudden no-confidence motion can topple a ministry overnight.
Which leads to a complete lack of continuity in policy, right?
Yeah.
If the government changes suddenly, the new government might completely scrap the long-term plans and economic priorities of the old one.
Exactly.
It's hard to build a 10-year infrastructure project or negotiate a complex international trade deal if the government changes every 2 years.
That administrative whiplash is a very real headache. But the academic critiques dive even deeper into the structural risks. For instance, the thinker Ramsey Muir warned about the dictatorship of the cabinet.
Wait, dictatorship of the cabinet, that sounds contradictory. Didn't we just establish that this system prevents despotism?
It prevents a single dictator. But Muir argued that if a ruling party manages to secure an absolute overwhelming majority in the parliament and enforces strict party discipline, the cabinet effectively becomes autocratic.
Ah, I see.
The legislature is supposed to control the executive, but in reality, a dominant cabinet ends up dictating terms to a rubber stamp legislature.
Oh, okay. Let's pull that group project analogy back in. It's like the popular kid in the group project who bullies the rest of the team into doing things their way. And because everyone knows that voting against the popular kid will fail the whole group, sinking the ship, nobody speaks up. The cabinet just steamrolls the legislature.
Precisely the danger. And this ties into the famous critique by Walter Bagehot. He described the cabinet as a hyphen that joins, a buckle that fastens the executive and the legislature. While that creates the harmony we praised earlier, critics argue it inherently violates the theory of the strict separation of powers.
Because they're the same people.
Exactly. The people drafting and executing the laws are the exact same people voting to pass them.
Okay, I want to zero in on one specific demerit here because it's a fascinating debate. Government by amateurs. The argument is that because the PM must choose ministers from sitting legislators, they might not be subject matter experts. So, you might have a health minister who isn't a doctor, or a defense minister who has never served in the military. I have to ask, is a lack of subject matter expertise actually a fatal flaw? Because demanding that only a scientist can run the science ministry sounds a bit, I don't know, elitist.
This is a classic debate in political science, and hitting on it actually brings out the core defense of the system. The parliamentary system does not claim to provide a government of technocrats. It provides a government of representatives.
Oh, that's a big distinction.
The logic is that the permanent civil service, the IAS officers, the seasoned bureaucrats provide the deep subject matter expertise and administrative continuity.
The bureaucrats are the technical brains of the operation.
Exactly. The minister's job is not to know the engineering math of how to build a bridge. The minister's job is to reflect the will of the people in deciding where the bridge should go and to hold those experts accountable to the public interest.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The bureaucrats are the experts, the ministers are the public conscience. Okay, this has been a fantastic conceptual breakdown. But we know competitive exams don't just test concepts in isolation. They love to test the boundaries of these definitions by comparing India to other countries.
Oh, yeah. Comparative politics is a massively high-yield area for these exams, and to navigate it, you really need to understand the golden rule of classification. There is a trap here that catches thousands of students every single year.
Okay, let me put my peer study buddy hat on for you right now because this is crucial. Do not mix up your axes of classification. When you see the terms parliamentary versus presidential, that classification is strictly about the relationship between the executive and the legislature. That's the horizontal axis of power.
Correct. But when you see the terms federal versus unitary, that is a completely different classification. That is strictly about the relationship between the national government and the regional or state governments. That's the vertical axis of power.
So let's test this. If a multiple-choice question asks about the separation of powers between New Delhi and Kerala, I am strictly looking at the federal versus unitary axis. But if it asks about the Prime Minister's relationship with the Lok Sabha, that is purely the parliamentary versus presidential axis.
You've got it. So if an exam asks you to classify India as a whole, India is parliamentary on the executive legislature axis, and it is federal on the national regional axis.
Okay, so compare that to the United States.
The USA is presidential, meaning strict separation of powers. The president is a single executive with a fixed term and is not responsible to the legislature. But, like India, the U.S. is also federal, dividing power between Washington, D.C. and the 50 states.
So India is parliamentary plus federal. The U.S. is presidential plus federal. But what about Britain? We always hear about the Westminster model, so didn't India just copy Britain word for word?
Not at all, and that's the final layer of the exam trap. While India adopted the broad British parliamentary model, there are massive structural differences. First, let's look at our axis. Britain is parliamentary, yes, but it is unitary, not federal. All the real power is centralized in the national government in London.
What about the head of state? Because India is a republic, we have an elected president. Britain is a monarchy with a hereditary king or queen.
Exactly. Then there's the power of the legislature itself. The British Parliament is considered sovereign. It has supreme legal authority. It can pass or repeal literally any law it wants. The Indian Parliament is not sovereign.
Right.
Its powers are limited by a written constitution, the federal system we've just discussed, and the power of judicial review.
Judicial review, meaning the Supreme Court of India can look at a law passed by Parliament and strike it down if it violates the Constitution. The British courts generally cannot strike down an act of Parliament.
Exactly. Next, consider who gets to be the Prime Minister. In Britain, by convention, the PM must be a member of the lower house, the House of Commons. But in India, the PM can be a member of either house. We have had several prime ministers who sat in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house.
And there are two very specific British features that India deliberately did not adopt: the shadow cabinet and the legal responsibility of ministers. Why didn't India take those? Let's start with the shadow cabinet.
Well, in Britain, the opposition party forms a parallel shadow cabinet to mirror ruling ministers, ready to take over instantly if the government falls. India didn't adopt this because it's largely impractical for us.
Why is that?
Britain historically has a strong two-party system. India has a vast, complex, multi-party landscape heavily reliant on dynamic coalitions. Organizing a stable shadow cabinet out of dozens of fractured opposition parties is incredibly difficult.
That makes total sense. And what about legal responsibility?
In Britain, ministers have legal responsibility. They must countersign official acts of the head of state, meaning they can actually be sued in court for those acts. India does not require this. In India, the courts are barred from inquiring into the nature of the advice tendered by the ministers to the president. The accountability in India is purely political to the parliament, not legal to the crown.
Okay, my brain is officially full, but in the best way possible. We have moved way beyond just memorizing bullet points. You understand the why behind the rules. Let's do a rapid-fire exam-ready recap to lock this all in.
Let's do it.
The real executive is the prime minister. The nominal executive is the president.
The legal trigger for the center is Articles 74 and 75. For the states, it's 163 and 164.
The bedrock feature is collective responsibility. The Council of Ministers sinks or swims together, and they answer specifically to the lower house, the Lok Sabha.
The golden rule of classification. Parliamentary versus presidential is about the executive and legislature. Federal versus unitary is about the national and regional governments.
And overarching all of this is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's thesis. The framers preferred the daily accountability of a pop quiz over the long-term stability of a final exam.
It is the philosophical core of how the Indian government functions.
We started this deep dive thinking about sitting in that massive exam hall, staring at a trick question, feeling like you had to just magically remember a disconnected fact. But now, you aren't just reciting facts. You understand the gears of the engine. You know why the head coach calls the plays while the owner watches from the box, and you know exactly what happens if the head coach loses the locker room.
It's all connected.
It really is. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with the final provocative thought to mull over. Dr. Ambedkar made his choice in the late 1940s, prioritizing daily accountability. But think about the modern era we live in today. We are in an era of lightning-fast 2047 news cycles, viral social media outrages, and incredibly complex multi-decade global policies like artificial intelligence regulations and digital economics.
Things move much faster now.
Exactly. Given all that, would he still make the same choice? Is the intense, volatile daily responsibility of the parliamentary system still worth the cost of policy instability today? Or if they were writing the Constitution right now, facing down these modern complexities, would the framers choose to give the executive a little more breathing room? Think about it. Good luck with your studies.